Call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Seeger.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Nugent. Trustee Johnson. Trustee Renucci.
Here.
Trustee Smalley.
Here.
Trustee Wisniewski. Thank you.
All right, citizen participation per Village Resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject can be anything, whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of a publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or if specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in an agenda item. With that being said, would anybody like to speak during citizen participation? Would anybody like? Great. Would anybody like to speak during citizen participation? If not, I'll close citizen participation and move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all of the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda.
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On to miscellaneous business. Dam project update. Tim?
Jason, Andy Nelson, myself had a site visit last week, kind of going through where the project was at. Obviously, we had that large storm that came through, the 7 inches of rain or so, approximately. And there's some damage to some of the stream banks, some of the riffles as well. Some of that's been addressed already by the contractor, but one of the things we're looking for is some feedback from the village board regarding anything additional we might want to do to address some of that. Some of the big things we noticed or was noted was some of the banks, and noticed it in that big pond area we built, along with some of the banks adjacent to the stream, kind of sloughed in where the substrate material, the material that's there, which is obviously very silty, got very moist and kind of sloughed into the stream a little bit, which makes it a very stable level. However, the concern noted is that it may have a propensity to allow cattails to grow because instead of having an abrupt stream bank, we have kind of a low, shallow area coming in, which is kind of nice for breeding cattails, which of course is nobody's favorite thing. So looking for some feedback on that. There are some other things that noted in this that I think we're just going to have the contractor take care of either way, such as that wetland scrape that we did. There's a little bit of I'll call it a waterfall between there and the main stream. It's about 8 inches high, and so we're going to have them pull that down. It was described to us that the northern pike, which would like to breed there, potentially, are relatively unathletic fish. So they can get up about a 4-inch waterfall, but at 8 inches is a little too much for them. So there's some things we have to do there to address that, widen out a little bit to allow the pike to get up there to breed. It's a great breeding area, good for the fishery. However, as it currently stands, it probably can't get up that little waterfall. So there's that, and then there's some additional rocks that would really be benefited. I'll call it the first riffle, which is the riffle closest to the road, near where the old dam was. That took the most damage from the stream, from the flooding, and I think we were pretty fortunate that it held together and didn't blow out into a new channel. So one of the things we'd like to do is add some stone to kind of reinforce those banks to make sure that we channelize that water where we want it to go, not that it would jump the bank in the future. Obviously it held this time, but there is some of that we'd like to do. Another thing noted in there, item number 4, at the confluence of the main channel and the pond outlet, there's a really nice little hole developing there. Let's get down to the gravel substrate. It's really good for the fish. Andy Nelson, the fish guy, is excited about it. However, there is some armoring that should happen there, just because the bank itself is starting to, it has the potential to erode. There's a lot of energy coming up right up against a bank area. This is an area before we even touch the stream, so it's really not a contractor item because it's outside of our work area. But because of some of the, I guess I'll call it stream morphology changes, that area will be very susceptible to erosion. The area we're talking about is probably as far as between Jason and I, maybe even half that distance. It's not a long distance, but some additional armoring of some stone in there would really be helpful. Other items, I guess the cattail and Phragmite, the geese, which is maybe the first time I've ever heard of geese being useful, are really mowing down the Phragmite. It was amazing how much they're just keeping and helping control that right now. But mowing when we can in the future will be helpful, obviously, as well.
One thing I just want to clarify, as Tim mentioned, cattails potential, we're talking about a few foot wide strip of cattails. We're not talking about the entire area. I just want to make sure to point that out to the board, just where conditions allow, right at that bank of the stream.
Yeah, and I'm kind of thinking about that, the pond area we built. There's an area, instead of going from 0, once the water depth gets more than a foot, we're out of kind of that zone where we have to worry about cattails. In that area, there's probably about a 5-foot band, would you say, Jason? From 0 to 1 feet? Yeah, so it's probably about a 5-foot band that's going to be susceptible to those cattails. And so there's some thought about maybe we reinforce certain sections of it so that allows people to control the cattails in other ways, or look at some different options in those areas.
I thought we had a minimum, there was a minimum depth of which cattails could not then grow.
Yeah, once you get down to about 1 foot, we're pretty good. We're pretty safe.
Well, I thought it was less than a foot, but I could be wrong. It's been a while since we discussed cattails.
Do you have enough rock still from the business park?
There is some more rock out there. He got most of the, he being RLP, got most of the rock that he could handle. There's some big stuff out there still that is just tough for them to deal with as far as moving. But there is some more out there that Jason took a site visit there about a week ago.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some of it is just too big to utilize for what we need it for, but
Dynamite.
there is some out there yet. I don't think we can do that.
I do have a question, though, in regards to the stone banks in themselves, Tim. Are they going to maybe try to redo these like they would seawalls on lakes with a combination of large stone, gravel, and fabric to try to keep that from washing out?
So yes and no. To do that for the entire length, I think would be just way too expensive. However, there's some areas where we had talked about doing that. Right at the first riffle we had talked about, the thought process was we would take some 12 to 18-inch boulders, stack those around, excavate that material that's kind of slumped in, put it behind those rocks to allow it to then dry out and then shape it over time. It would give us that bank, but also give us that deflecting energy to deflect the stream itself.
They may want to look into putting fabric in there and some gravel behind it before they put that material back there so it won't wash through those big rocks.
Some of that will happen. Some of that's already there, but yes.
Yeah, and there was fabric, along lining the shorelines, but unfortunately, with the way the consistency of this material, like Jello, we've used that term before, and then we got that heavy rain. Unfortunately, it wasn't secured enough yet that it held up to that. So it was just saturated with water, and still is, and that's why we're experiencing this
Was the
washout.
fabric behind the stone or in front of the stone? The big rocks?
So it was essentially tucked into the bank at the water's edge.
There was no large rock.
Yeah.
That's what they want to add. So is this something that you're looking to do before winter, after winter?
So we talked to Andy about this. We talked about timing and if we decided we wanted to do anything else, how would we attack this? The prevailing thought is if we went to do this right now, we would probably do more damage than it'd be worth. And just because it's A, got pretty wet out there, B, any tracking out there is gonna hurt the grass cover that we do have and rut up and cause damage. So the prevailing thought is wait till we get some frozen ground, get some hard costs from them as well, and then figure out, okay, how do we want to attack this?
And there's really no guarantee that this is gonna be a full solution behind this as well, right? I mean, earth is going to move a little bit. We've got silt fences that we put in place to hold it back when we have erosion control and things of that sort. But some stones and a little bit of netting, as you may speak of, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be the solution. It's a good attempt at it, though. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, this storm was a good and bad thing. One, it kind of tested the stream for how it's going to perform long-term, and 90% passed with flying colors. But it also gave us some weaknesses from areas that we say, hey, listen, if we want this to hold up in this certain way here in the future, we think we also probably need to do X, Y, and Z to try to bolster that and put this in place for the longer term. At the same time, Mother Nature's Mother Nature, and she'll win when she wants to.
So as far as the cattails you're talking about, there's a small section. That's what you're identifying, a 5-foot wide path that may come into play along certain areas of the stream.
That's where the potential exists.
So, really the bigger concern about cattails when we first started talking about were the invasive species of cattails. Not necessarily cattails themselves. Cattails themselves aren't necessarily a bad thing. They're in every waterway in this entire state. So I think as long as we're making sure that if we are able to control in a small concentrated area, either eradication as it pops up, or if it does come up as a invasive species, then I can see why we would want to do anything. But outside of the fact that it just being cattails, I don't know of a single lake or stream that doesn't have cattails around it.
Yeah, and at this point, they have not popped up, but we're just kind of looking at how the stream, and especially that pond area, kind of changed a bit, and identifying it as, hey, this is pretty good habitat for cattails. We know that to the west, there's a strong, near Town Line Road, that whole area is all cattails. We know that there's a good seed bank there that will blow our way.
So you're looking just from direction from us on next steps with RLP?
Correct, and we're not bringing any, we've got a budget update here as well. We're not bringing any real budgetary costs for this. We're just kind of want to take the temperature to say, hey, do you want us to look into other things we could do over the next few months? It's not time critical that way because we're not going to be wanting to do any of this until we have frozen ground anyways. But do we want to look and see what we want to address? And if we do, then we'll go back to RLP and start talking about getting costs and how we might want to attack that.
I personally think we need to get the cost before we start talking about whether we want to do it or not. So let's get some numbers first, and then we can maybe have that conversation about yes or no.
That makes sense. That's kind of what we want to see. If you want us to look into it, that's what we would do, and that's kind of where we're at.
And it doesn't have to be aligned exactly to your memo, but I liked your memo in that you broke it out by area. So, hey, this, we could do 1, 2, and 3. It's relatively cheap. Number 4 is really expensive, or whatever that is. That way, it's not an all or nothing discussion.
Sounds good. Any other questions on the dam project?
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. So, update on boardroom equipment. Eileen?
Okay, so I think many of you have noticed that there's some changes here in the boardroom, and I wanted to give an update so not only the board is aware, but also the public who is watching our live streams is aware of the changes that are being implemented and where we're at with those changes. because of supply chain issues, the contractor has decided to implement things in phases. So we do not have our microphones or our Crestron device yet, which we knew that was on back order, and it doesn't sound like well, I guess I should back up. When they ordered it, they said that the expected delivery was September of 2023. We're hoping it'll come in sooner than that. I think it was a good recommendation to go that route. It sounds like things will really be streamlined as far as the streaming process, and it'll be easy for anybody to do at that point. For the time being, there are some different steps than we used to have, but I think it still is an improvement. The most important thing that happened last week was they hooked up our audio so it's directly streaming. So the public who is listening remotely should not have the sound cutting out any longer. So that was the most important improvement of this entire update. They did install the cameras, as you notice in the boardroom. Currently, I have to manually switch cameras once we have that Crestron device and the microphones in. Those cameras will zoom into where that microphone's active so that 2 or 3 people will be displayed at a time. So that stream will pick up more on those nonverbal cues, and the people who are watching have a better understanding of who's actually talking at the meeting. So that will have to wait. So when I can, I will manually switch between the podium and the board. Not everybody's in the view right now. It's the best we can do with what we are able to implement currently. We are now streaming the meetings directly to YouTube, so we have eliminated Zoom as an option to view for the public, but the meetings are live streamed to our YouTube channel, and the recordings are available afterwards. I am no longer sharing packet materials to that external feed, so what you're seeing on the boardroom monitors are just in the boardroom. All those packet materials are available online for remote attendees. So right now, the meeting's being run through my computer. There are going to be times that you might hear a sound. If I click on something and my computer dings, it does come through on the audio. We'll just have to live with it for the time being. And then eventually, we will get to the point where we can seamlessly switch between my computer displaying on monitors and iPads. I know at times board members share iPad items. Right now, it's not as seamless as I'd like it to be. They might be coming back for that, but once we get that Crestron device again, that'll be a better situation. And then I guess the last thing that was installed was a new phone. So the phone that is here now is just this little keypad that integrates with the microphone system. This one is no longer active. I'll be removing it. And I think that summarizes all the updates. I just wanted everybody to be aware of the changes and what those meant and how that looked different for the public. One of the things I want the board to be aware of is I will be switching to Teams if anybody needs to attend remotely, either a contracted service or a board member. I won't be paying for the Zoom webinar subscription anymore. That was a little bit costly, so it'll be a little savings for the village. However, if we do have special meetings, I am going to look at whether we need to retain a very basic Zoom, because Zoom will stream directly to YouTube. So if we would happen to have a special meeting where I can't be in the boardroom, I might need that functionality, because Teams has been saying they will have that functionality, but I have not seen it come out yet. So, were there any questions on any of that?
I have one question, because you were talking about the cameras, and when somebody speaks, the camera's going to focus on the person speaking. What if there's a lively discussion going and 3 or 4 board members are talking back? Are those cameras going to go crazy, or?
I'm not quite sure. We did talk about the microphone system that we're getting, and the ability for, numerous mics to be live at once and those type of situations. But I think we're just going to have to test things out and see. But I think, currently I feel like we have a board that's really respectful of each other. I don't see many discussions where people are trying to talk over each other. So hopefully
That'd be the
that can
responsibility of the chair of the meeting as
Yes.
well to control that. Any other questions for Eileen? No? We'll move on to ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 2022-13, consideration of an amendment to the zoning code pertaining to airport height restrictions variances if the FAA deems it not to be an air hazard.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-13.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I just want to clarify that the motion is actually to set the public hearing date, because this one is following a little different path, and it has to go to the plan commission still.
How much higher are they talking about that tower being than what our current restrictions are?
It's like 100 feet more than our current restriction. It's quite a difference.
Yes, and we did go to the Bureau of Aeronautics and asked about that, because the height restriction map that we have is actually labeled as being produced by the Bureau of Aeronautics. And we got a couple of interesting responses from them, because we wanted to make sure that doing this was not going to put our grant assurances in jeopardy in any way. And basically what they said is that that map we're using from the 80s is somewhat antiquated and outdated, and that you have more accurate ways of achieving the same thing nowadays through like GIS. So they said they were actually seeing numerous municipalities come to them with questions about that, where they're having to issue variances, and they find them to not be a hazard to air navigation. So it wasn't quite as concerning as I originally thought, I guess, after talking to the BOA about that FAA study.
And to be clear, you know, the height limitation zoning ordinance that we have is a requirement of the FAA for grant assurances. So if they're willing to grant an exemption, we should be fine.
And that's what this ordinance does, is gives us that tool to be able to do that in situations like this.
So if the FAA approves the exception, okay, they're the ones that requested it to begin with, right?
So we've got a motion to send this to public hearing and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to reports. Final audit from TID 3. Any questions?
I just want to note that we have issued the settlement checks, so any extra money after we've paid all the debts of the TID is dispersed to the overlaying taxing jurisdictions. So those already have been issued to all those taxing jurisdictions. At the next board meeting, I will be giving you guys a memo to authorize a transfer of the village's share of those surplus funds, and likely recommending that you send that over to capital projects.
How about from the municipal court financial reports from August and September? Any questions? Financial reports, any questions? How about the library minutes from 9/13? Any questions? Emergency services from 9/13. How about the police department's third quarter report? Any questions?
Yeah. Good news, we get our new car tomorrow. Ordered it back in January. They said it would be here by May, so we're right on time. And I sold an abandoned vehicle today. The auction closed today, so it was up there for 2 weeks. Got $2,900 for it, so, yeah.
You know, they're also almost getting a car that if you wait another month or two, you could get the next year.
How about any questions for the planning commission minutes from 10:10? Questions about the Public Works third quarter report? It is a lot of work, and I guess I got one question. I know that when you were not in the position you're in right now, you were the deputy director, and just curious if you feel that there's a need to maybe have a position like that to help you out, because it is a lot. And I keep on thinking that maybe at some point we can find a way to lessen that burden on you and all the projects that you have, but it just doesn't seem to end.
Well, it's a challenge and it's a balance because as these guys would tell you, there's so much that we have to do from a regulation standpoint that we have to be doing that as well. So we've just got to do the best we can with what we have.
A lot of,
until
a lot
the
of
point we can-
compliance issues?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're never standing around doing nothing. I'll promise you that. They're always busy with something or another. And a lot of it, more and more of it is becoming regulation driven that we've got, we just have no choice. We can't let that slide because it's got a deadline. So,
Like turning all the
It's-
valves?
yeah, that's a perfect example. Cleaning sewers or cross connections, all of that sort of stuff. It sounds great and I would love it. It's just, it's gonna take away from something else at this point.
The biggest reason I ask is because, the chief has a deputy. Eileen, as far as I'm concerned, has her deputy sitting next to you. And if it would be of any help in your path of work, because it does seem like there's just is a lot.
Well, and obviously to be clear, the report you're looking at, so you guys pretty much see what I do, right? We're always talking about the projects, but the quarterly report is mostly what these guys are doing. That's what I'm filling you in on. So, again, it would be great. It's just, unfortunately, I don't see where the extra time comes from at this point.
I'm surprised I didn't see a whole paragraph in here about Frontage Street, just,
It will be nice to have new water main and frontage.
And you and I talked about technology too, to get rid of some of the paper and, if there's other things from a compliance standpoint too, that would make sense for us to invest in software technology-wise so that we can make these guys more efficient, then let's talk about that too. Sometimes it's not always just throwing more people at it.
Absolutely.
Jason, on your Highway 20 project with the sanitary, that obviously, it's going to be done before the road work starts, correct?
Yeah, so there was some issues with DOT and the environmental study they did. They didn't cover as large of an area as they originally had said they had. So we decided to pull all the sanitary lining out and do it as a standalone project in conjunction with the timing of their project. Because we will have to do some bypass pumping across Highway 20 where they'll have to lay hoses across. So we'll have to, timing-wise, we'll have to do it in conjunction, but it didn't make sense to do that portion with the DOT's contract any longer.
And the other question on the front page was, as far as hydrant repairs, I know we had a sour setup with the hydrants with this last road project around on ES and the square and everything. And I know, no, I guess I don't want, you're gonna see if we have to replace any? Is that what you're basically doing, is checking that?
No, that was just maintenance. So once a year, every hydrant gets operated. Twice a year, most hydrants get operated. And that's just issues that pop up during the regular preventative maintenance.
Well, okay, I was just seeing with the hydrants that leak and hydrants that operate hard, and I don't know if
Yep.
you replace them or just you can
No,
rebuild them.
we rebuild them typically, unless they're too old that we can't get parts for them, but
You mentioned about the parks cameras, and probably should ask you and Chief about, do we feel like the vandalism's better under control?
what do you guys think? That putting those parks cameras in, has that made a difference?
Vandalism, yes, I would say, but keeping kids out of the dugouts, no.
So they're still there, they're just not doing the damage?
They're not so far.
So would you
I
say,
guess that's a win.
would you say then maybe some kind of a temporary enclosure to lock up the dugouts when that field's not being used would probably be the way to go? Just off the top of my head.
Yeah, the way that they're constructed, that'd be a difficult feat. And I don't know how much that would end up costing us to do that. If the kids aren't damaging anything and they're just sitting in there? No?
They have a
No.
habit, they have a habit of starting bonfires there.
Well, we've got to step in the right direction.
I guess on the capital projects, you're talking about sidewalk repairs. And I guess I've just since that new restaurant's opened up where the old, Standard Station was, or the car dealership, right along Clark Street there.
Okay?
You may wanna take a look at the sidewalk down there. Cause I've been walking up that area now, and boy, oh boy, that's like the old Fireball roller coaster at Riverview. Holy smokers.
Yeah, there's some other sections of sidewalk that need attention. We're just working within budgets to
I
get what we
understand.
can.
Most of it's the phone companies.
And has everybody been relatively receptive as far as that 50% share cost?
Yeah, it's actually gone real, all the work is completed, and the letters went out, I believe, late last week, for payment.
Jason, how long, you say you're gonna fix truck 12, new box and some other stuff in there? And I guess my question is 2003, how long before it's gonna get replaced?
So that's the next truck to be phased out of snow plowing, and so they plow for 20 years, and then the way we're doing it currently is we're buying a truck every 5 years. So they plow for 20 years, and then they go to the sewer plant for 5 years to be the sludge hauling truck, and then they go. So that one's got probably 3 years of plowing left, and then it'll, if we continue on the course we have.
No more questions? Okay, moving on. Closed session, adjourn, I make a motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1E for the purpose of conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Cell tower lease.
Second.
Roll call?
President Seeger.
Yes.
Trustee Alexander.
Yes.
Trustee Nugent. Trustee Johnson.
Yes.
Trustee Renucci.
Yes.
Trustee Smalley. Trustee Wisniewski.
Yes.
Thank you.